One time I was on deadline and it almost took me out. Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I'm an author and I have two books currently out, the Rosewood Hunt and the Wilde Trials. They're both young adult thrillers out with HarperCollins. I have two more books coming out with HarperCollins, the first of which is Worse Than the Others, and that's currently slated for 2027. And I have two adult books coming out with Berkeley. The first is I Hope This Email Finds You in Hell, and that comes out a year from now. All that to say, I've been around the deadline block a few times. This summer, I was on double deadline for a rewrite I had to do for Worse Than the Others and for developmental edits for I Hope This Email Finds You in Hell. I also have a full-time 9-to-5 day job, and while it is remote, which to me is a huge privilege, and I don't know if I could ever juggle all of this if it wasn't remote, that is obviously still a huge factor in trying to juggle being on not only one deadline, but two. As I head into fall, I will probably be on double deadline again because I'm about to start drafting my second adult book for Berkeley, which hasn't been announced yet, but I'm so excited for it. And I'm either gonna have to do Email in Hell edits or Worse Than the Other edits, or both. So pray for me, I guess, because I think I might be on triple deadline, actually. I didn't think about that till now. Anyway, we'll figure it out. We always do. I feel so lucky to be an author and do this job. It's my favorite job in the whole world, but also it's important to remember to take care of yourself during deadline. And this is something I honestly kind of had to learn the hard way. So I'm making this deadline survival guide with some tips that I've learned along the way that have really helped me, frankly, survive being on deadline. When I first started being on publishing deadlines, it was in 2023, and I signed the deal for my Rosewood Hunt in 2022, but the book was already drafted. So even though I had a deadline for developmental edits, which are bigger picture edits that have domino effects, that was something to learn, but it wasn't until I drafted the Wilde Trials in fall 2023 that I truly wasn't sure if I could do it. A Rosewood Hunt came out October 2023, and the Wilde Trials had gotten approved for me to write late August 2023. So I pretty much only had the month of September to write it. I ended up drafting it in 36 days, and looking back, I am like, why did I do that? Because honestly, I have a really lovely team, and I know if I had gone to them and be like, hey, I can't do this, they would have been like, okay, we'll figure it out, we can push it out a season, whatever. But I'm an overachiever, and I wanted to get an A+ in being a published author, and I was like, no, I need to draft this book in a month just to show I can do it. Looking back, honestly, it is just ridiculous that I drafted the book in 36 days. I don't even remember most of drafting, and I remember reading it back in December when things had calmed down in my life. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this book is good, actually. I was so scared it was so bad, but of course my team would never let me put out a bad book. But it was just I wrote it in a fever dream. And along with writing it in a fever dream, a few other things kind of happened. Some was personal stuff, but a lot of it was me just not taking good care of myself because I just was so focused on drafting this book. I am someone who likes going on walks every day. I like enjoying the seasons. I love touching grass. And all of that just fell to the wayside while I was drafting. And yes, when you're on deadline, you have to make certain sacrifices, of course. But frankly, I don't think it should really ever come at the cost of your mental well-being or physical well-being. Since then, I've been on multiple other deadlines, and I've just learned more ways to help me survive being on deadline and make my own life easier so I can still prioritize writing my book, doing my day job, but I'm not literally bending myself and breaking myself to do it. Basically, I just wanted to make this guide to talk a little bit more about being on deadline and to share some things that help me keep that work-life balance, because at the end of the day, even though being an author is the coolest job in the world, and I hope none of this sounds like me complaining at all, because it's so not. It's just been a learning curve. It's still something you can get burned out from, and I don't want that to happen to you, and I sure don't want it to ever happen to me again. So let's get started on Mackenzie's deadline survival guide. First off, we are going to live by the mantra, survive, not thrive. I am a yes person. I'm a person who very much prides myself on being able to do kind of it all the time, but it's just not realistic when you're on deadline. So a big thing that I kind of hope people take with them from this video is that you're not going to be your best self on deadline, and that is fine. You don't have to be. Say no to stuff, but also say yes to stuff, because again, don't let it take over your whole life. We're trying to survive. It's okay if we don't thrive. Another thing that I think can be really helpful when on deadline is meal prepping. And now listen, I'm not a huge meal prepper myself. I'm usually like maybe one meal a week, but what I found with meal prepping is it's really easy to just eat kind of poorly when on deadline, because that's all I would have time for sometimes. So by making even just like a pasta salad a week that I could then eat during lunch, it at least just gave me something to eat. Other thing is, like, you don't want to just not eat, and I feel like sometimes when you get in like a writing groove, you don't want to take breaks and disrupt that concentration. So a few things that always helped is, like I said, having just like one meal, even if it was only lunch, that I would prep earlier in the week. I love pasta salads, and there are just so many recipes on like TikTok and Pinterest that make it really easy. And then another thing that was really helpful is I would get like pre-portioned snacks, and that way I didn't have to like grab a whole bag of chips or anything like that. And I would also specifically choose snacks that wouldn't make my fingers cheesy, so I could just like grab the bag and then have it near me while I was typing, and I didn't have to like take a break. I do think it's worth it to plan meal breaks when you're writing, but I get it. Again, survive, not thrive. Another thing that I find really helpful is to figure out even just some sort of writing schedule, so I'm not just barreling toward this date. What I do for that is I look at my deadline date and then the day it currently is, and I usually divide my total word count, or if I'm drafting a book, my anticipated word count, by how many writing days I have. Now the key word here is writing days, because honestly, even on deadline, I don't write every day. I simply can't, and I think it's really important to try and build in break days. So if you're someone who takes weekends off, or if you have a day job and you know that some days at your day job are just way too whack to ever try and fit something else in, usually I would divide my like writing schedule by weekdays only. So I add up, I literally look at a calendar and just count how many weekdays I have until my deadline, and then I'll divide my total word count by those days, and that gives me the minimal number of words I need to revise or draft by X date. The caveat here is obviously things change. Some days you revise or draft more, some days you revise or draft less. But again, it just kind of gives you a ballpark, and the closer you can stay to that schedule, the more likely that you'll probably feel a little bit more at peace, knowing that at least you're not going to end up with a week left of your deadline and like 40,000 words left to revise. I would know. I've done it. And again, we're always going to be working with estimates because we're writers, and sometimes we write more, less. If you're drafting and you're me, I'm an overwriter. So even though I plan on 80,000 words, the books are always 100,000, but trust me, it still helps. Along with that, if you're drafting, I find it really fun to use a draft tracker. This is less for performance metrics and more, and like while it is cool for performance metrics, I kind of think it's more great just to see what you're doing day to day. I think it's so easy when you're working on a new book, specifically a new book, because the blank slate just feels so daunting. And I think it's really nice to be like, oh, hey, I'm actually doing this thing, and like slowly but surely they'll get filled out. A really easy way to make a draft tracker is using like Excel or Google Sheets. I use Google Sheets, and there are like different formulas, but honestly, you might be able to find templates online. This next one definitely takes some planning ahead of time, but I really can't emphasize how important it is to start a routine before you go on deadline. If you're a person where you get up and you go to the gym or go for a walk, get in the habit of doing that every day or every few days or however often you want to do it before you start deadline, so you're not like on deadline and trying to start these other new habits and it's just an overwhelm of new things you're trying to start. That way, when you start deadline and you do have to slide in these chunks of writing time, you already have your day kind of laid out, and it makes it so much easier to figure out where you're gonna put those chunks. I say that because when I was on deadline for the Wilde Trials, I was so excited about it, but I basically let it take over my life. And I used to go on walks in the mornings, but that wasn't like super established in my routine. And then basically I started drafting in the mornings, and then I just would never go on walks. And walks are like my happy time, my hot girl walks. And it really impacted me. If you can keep up with whatever routine you had beforehand, it might seem like there's not enough hours of the day, and trust me, there really aren't. But I also think it's really important to prioritize your mental well-being. And if you're a person with like hobbies or even second and third jobs, again, you don't want writing to take over your whole life, even if you're getting paid for it and even if it's also a job. It's kind of weird because I think since a lot of us start with writing being a passion project, even when we get to a point where we're getting paid for it, we don't still think of it like a job. But if you're talking to your friend and they're really burnt out at their marketing job, you would be advising them to have a work-life balance. So as authors, we should be advising each other the same. This is one of my hardest things to do when I'm on deadline, but lean on your community. And I know this comes with the caveat of having a community to begin with, but it could look like even just one or two close writing friends. And what I mean is, it can be so much more fun to be on deadline if you have like an accountability buddy or somebody you can send snippets to, or even a document where you can drop in chapters as you go to a trusted source. It can just be a good way to kind of keep the excitement going for you and for a project. And also, they might have a project that they want you to read, and it can kind of just be fun to cultivate these relationships. When you're on deadline, it can be really easy for relationships to kind of just fall to the wayside, whether in personal life, an online life, whatever. And again, we're trying to survive, not thrive, but finding kind of mutual grounds and people who might even be in the same or similar position as you can be a great opportunity to grow and bond together. Honestly, anytime I get stuck when I'm revising or drafting, I will literally send audio messages to my friends and be like, friends who I've told the book to already, and even if they haven't read it, they usually know a little bit about it, and I will just talk it through. And I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is just to talk about it, and then usually they'll send audio messages back, and it kind of goes back and forth for a little bit, and it's so helpful just to have these conversations. And if you can't do it with your friends, honestly, that's also kind of what your agent should be there for too. I definitely do things like that with my agent as well, and maybe even your editor. Kind of tied in with the survive, not thrive thing. Give yourself grace. Being on deadline is really hard, it's really taxing, and it's one of those things that's almost like an invisible job, I feel like, especially if you're home with like a partner or family. I think it can be really easy for it to be devalued and discounted as work, but it is work. It is kind of exhausting. And at the end of the day, you're literally like pouring your creativity into this thing, and then you're gonna send it off for someone else to judge and critique it. So it's just a lot. And if you're not able to do all the things you usually do, and that's okay. And along with giving yourself grace is don't strive for perfection. I know that's hard to hear because like I personally get so uncomfortable sending editors at literal publishing houses first drafts, but now that I've done it a couple times, and honestly to varying degrees, I sent my editors a first draft for a book almost a year ago now, and they got back to me and I had to rewrite it. And I was like mortified, but honestly, this is their job, this is my job. And sometimes when you're at your job, you guys just have to kind of work together and work through it, and that's how it goes. I guess the point is just give yourself grace, because no book is the same, and no matter how many books you write, every single one will have like a different process, different things that editors point out, maybe even different editors, who knows. So it's okay to not hit it perfect the first try or the second or the third, as I'm learning. Drop things to maintain your sanity. Over the summer, I basically said I was gonna do a low-so summer, and what it meant was low social media. Usually I am petrified to take a social media break because I just know the algorithm will punish me. But this time I was like, I have books to write. Like, I simply cannot wake up every morning and spend 3 hours on my phone trying to figure out what to post. And I'm gonna be honest, it was so healing to take that time. So maybe for you, your time suck isn't social media, and that's totally fine. But all I want to say is don't be afraid to drop things temporarily so you can focus on your deadline, even if it feels like something that you should still be doing. At the end of the day, we are authors before we are anything else. And I constantly need to remind myself of that, but I found it helpful. And again, this all ties into what we started with survive, not thrive, and giving yourself grace. My last big tip is plan something to look forward to post deadline. So I did this kind of extreme over the summer. I had a deadline that on July 15th was due, and then I had another deadline on August 15th that was due. So I basically spent the summer on double deadline, and that was really hard. But what made it a little bit harder and also kept me motivated is after both those deadlines, I had trips planned. So I literally could not ask for an extension. Like, I just took that right out of the equation. Do I recommend that? No. But did it give me the motivation to kick into high gear? Yes. And I will say the other good part about it is then when I went on my trips, I was just like brain empty. Like, I did not have a single thought the whole time. So I would kind of recommend it for that reason. But if you don't want to do it as extreme as that, or frankly expensive, you can just set like little fun things to look forward to. Like, maybe it's taking yourself out to dinner to celebrate, or going to a concert, or even just reading a book you've been excited about. Set a little thing to celebrate, because it is a milestone to finish your deadline, and especially on time, but even in general, if you need to ask for an extension, people do that all the time too. So just kind of celebrate, because it is a big deal. I hope all these were helpful, and if you want any other tips, I'm happy to share them. And just a reminder, my books, The Rosewood Hunt and The Wilde Trials, are out. They're kind of like the perfect fall read because they're mystery thrillers, and I just think as we come into spooky season, what more could you want? And also, if you're excited about my adult book, I Hope This Email Finds You in Hell, which sold to Berkeley earlier this year, I'm super excited because as we enter fall, now we're in the season where it will literally come out a year from now, and we're talking about covers and pre-order links are gonna come up. So if you want to read about a book about a receptionist who catches her hot boss performing an exorcism after hours and discovers hell exists and has to go on a road trip with him through the underworld to save their favorite coworker, you can add it on Goodreads, I guess. Also, you have great taste. Thanks for listening, and if you're on deadline, I wish you the best of luck, and I'm always happy to try and share more things as I think of them, but I'm still learning and growing too. It's kind of scary how you never really reach the end, and every deadline is different, but we can at least help each other and share the things we do learn along the way. So till next time, love you, bye!